Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates spent their weekends at shopping malls and sleepovers, she could be found at the local shooting range with her grandfather, learning the fundamentals of marksmanship that would later save lives in ways she never imagined. Growing up in a small Texas town where Friday night football games were considered high entertainment, Sarah's interests set her apart from the beginning. Her grandfather, Miguel Martinez, was a Vietnam War veteran who had served as a sniper with the Marine Corps. He recognized something special in his granddaughter's steady hands and unwavering focus when she first picked up his old hunting rifle at age 12. Most people think shooting is about pulling a trigger, Miguel would tell her during their weekend sessions at the range. But it's really about patience, breathing, and understanding that every shot matters. In war, that understanding can mean the difference between going home to your family or not going home at all. Sarah absorbed these lessons like a sponge. She learned to control her breathing, to feel her heartbeat, and time her shots between the gentle rhythm. She studied wind patterns, understood how temperature and humidity could affect a bullet's trajectory, and developed an almost supernatural ability to remain calm under pressure. By the time she turned 16, she was outscoring seasoned hunters and competitive shooters at the local range. Her skills didn't go unnoticed, but they weren't always appreciated. At Roosevelt High School, Sarah faced constant ridicule from her peers. The popular girls would whisper behind her back about the weird gun girl, who spent her free time practicing military drills instead of learning to apply makeup. The boys weren't much better, alternating between mocking her interests and making crude jokes about what a girl with a gun might do. "Why don't you try something normal for once?" her classmate Jessica Parker would say, rolling her eyes whenever Sarah mentioned her weekend plans. Like maybe join the cheerleading squad or the drama club. You know, something girls actually do. The criticism wasn't limited to her peers. Several teachers, and even some parents in the community questioned whether it was appropriate for a teenage girl to be so involved with firearms. During a parent-teacher conference, Mrs. Henderson, her English teacher, suggested to Sarah's mother that perhaps it would be better if Sarah focused on more traditional feminine pursuits. "I'm not saying there's anything wrong with her hobby," Mrs. Henderson said carefully, "but I worry it might be limiting her social development. The other girls find it difficult to relate to her." Sarah's mother, Elena Martinez, had heard enough of these comments over the years. She defended her daughter's choices, but Sarah could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. The constant pressure from the community was wearing on the entire family. The mockery reached its peak during her junior year when Sarah decided to join the school's newly formed marksmanship club. The club was primarily made up of boys who had been hunting since childhood, and they weren't thrilled about having a girl join their ranks. The club's president, Tommy Williams, made his feelings clear from the first meeting. "I don't think this is really the place for you," he said, looking Sarah up and down with obvious skepticism. "This isn't target practice with your grandpa. We're talking about real competition here, real pressure. Maybe you'd be more comfortable with something less intense." The other boys snickered, but Sarah stood her ground. She had dealt with this attitude her entire life, and she wasn't about to back down now. "I think I can handle whatever you boys can dish out," she replied calmly, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. The club's faculty advisor, Coach Morrison, decided to settle the matter with a simple test. He set up a series of increasingly difficult targets at various distances, starting at 50 yards and extending out to 300 yards. Each member would get 10 shots at each distance, and their combined scores would determine their ranking within the club. Tommy Williams went first, and his performance was impressive. He had clearly been shooting for years, and his familiarity with the rifle showed. He managed to hit the center rings consistently at the shorter distances, though his accuracy dropped off significantly as the targets moved farther away. His final score was respectable enough to earn nods of approval from the other club members. Several other boys took their turns, each performing adequately but not exceptionally. There was nervous laughter and good-natured ribbing as they compared scores and made excuses for missed shots. The atmosphere was relaxed and familiar, the kind of camaraderie that comes from shared interests and mutual respect. When Sarah's turn came, the mood shifted noticeably. The casual conversation died down, and all eyes focused on her as she approached the shooting line. She could feel their skepticism, their expectation that she would fail and prove their assumptions correct. Some of them were probably already planning the jokes they would make at her expense. Sarah took her time setting up, adjusting the rifle's position and checking the scope settings. She ignored the whispered comments and barely suppressed laughter from behind her. This was exactly the kind of pressure her grandfather had prepared her for, the moment when external noise could either destroy your focus or sharpen it to a razor's edge. She began with the 50-yard targets, taking slow, deliberate shots. Each bullet found its mark in the center ring, the tight grouping drawing surprised murmurs from the watching boys. As she moved to the 100-yard targets, then the 200-yard targets, her accuracy never wavered. By the time she reached the final 300-yard targets, the range had fallen completely silent. Her last shot rang out across the range, and Coach Morrison lowered his binoculars with a look of amazement. "Perfect score," he announced, his voice filled with disbelief. 10 shots, 10 center hits, at every distance. I've never seen anything like it. The silence that followed was deafening. Tommy Williams stared at the target results with his mouth open, unable to process what had just happened. The other boys shifted uncomfortably, their earlier confidence completely shattered by what they had witnessed. But instead of gaining the respect she had earned, Sarah found herself facing an even more intense backlash. The boys' embarrassment quickly transformed into resentment, and they began spreading rumors about her family's military connections, suggesting that she had somehow cheated or received unfair advantages. "There's no way she's that good naturally," Tommy complained to anyone who would listen. "Her grandfather probably rigged the targets or something. Nobody shoots like that without some kind of help." The rumors gained traction, fed by the community's existing discomfort with Sarah's unconventional interests. Parents began questioning whether the marksmanship club was appropriate for the school, and several students started a petition to have it disbanded entirely. The administration, already nervous about firearms-related activities, began considering whether to cancel the program. Sarah watched as her moment of triumph was twisted into yet another reason for her to be ostracized. The one place where she thought her skills would be appreciated had become just another battleground where she had to defend her right to exist as she was. During this difficult period, her grandfather became her anchor. Miguel had faced similar challenges during his military service, where his Mexican heritage had made him a target for discrimination and doubt. He understood the frustration his granddaughter was experiencing and helped her channel it into motivation rather than bitterness. "People fear what they don't understand," he told her one evening as they sat on his back porch, watching the Texas sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. "Your skills threaten their assumptions about what a young woman should be capable of. That fear makes them lash out, but it doesn't make them right." He told her stories about his time in Vietnam, about the battles where precision and calm under pressure had saved lives. He explained how his fellow Marines had initially doubted his abilities because of his background, but how he had eventually earned their respect through consistent performance and unwavering dedication. "The military taught me something important," Miguel continued. "When bullets start flying, nobody cares about your background or whether you fit their expectations. They only care about whether you can do the job when it matters most. Someday, you might find yourself in a situation where all this ridicule and doubt becomes completely irrelevant." Sarah didn't know how prophetic those words would prove to be. She couldn't imagine that within a few short years, she would find herself in a situation where her despised skills would become the difference between life and death for some of America's most elite warriors. As her senior year approached, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Instead of applying to traditional colleges like her classmates, she decided to enlist in the United States Army. The decision came after months of research and soul-searching, influenced partly by her grandfather's stories and partly by her desire to find a place where her skills would be valued rather than mocked. Her announcement sent shockwaves through her family and community. Her mother was terrified at the thought of her daughter going to war, while her father worried about the physical and emotional challenges she would face as a woman in a male-dominated military environment. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," her mother pleaded during one of many difficult conversations about her future. "You're smart enough to go to any college you want. You could study engineering or medicine or anything else that interests you. Why throw your life away on this?" But Sarah had made up her mind. She saw the military as a place where merit mattered more than popularity, where her unique skills could be developed and utilized rather than dismissed and ridiculed. She wanted to serve her country, but more than that, she wanted to find her place in a world that had never quite known what to do with her. The process of enlisting was challenging in ways she hadn't expected. Military recruiters, while professional and encouraging, clearly had concerns about how a small-town girl would adapt to the rigors of military life. The physical fitness requirements alone were daunting, and Sarah spent months preparing her body for the challenges ahead. Her grandfather helped her prepare, designing a training regimen that would build not just her physical strength, but also her mental resilience. They ran miles through the Texas heat, practiced tactical movements, and worked on weapons handling until it became second nature. Miguel shared advanced techniques he had learned in combat, teaching her skills that went far beyond basic marksmanship. The military will teach you a lot, he explained during one particularly grueling training session. But they won't have time to teach you everything. The more you know going in, the better your chances of coming out. As her departure date approached, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. The years of mockery and isolation had been painful, but they had also forged her into someone stronger than she might have otherwise become. Every snide comment, every dismissive laugh, every attempt to make her conform had only reinforced her determination to prove that she belonged exactly where she was. Her last day at the shooting range with her grandfather was emotional for both of them. As they packed up the equipment they had used for so many years, Miguel handed her a small leather journal filled with his own notes and observations from his military service. "This contains everything I learned that they don't teach in boot camp," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Read it when you have time, but, more importantly, trust your instincts. You have gifts that can't be taught, and someday those gifts might save lives." Sarah left for basic training with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She was finally escaping the small-town mentality that had made her feel like an outsider for so long. But she was also venturing into unknown territory where the challenges would be even greater than anything she had faced before. Basic training proved to be everything she had expected and more. The physical demands were intense, pushing her body to limits she hadn't known existed. The mental pressure was equally challenging, as drill sergeants worked to break down individual personalities and rebuild them into disciplined soldiers. But Sarah thrived in ways that surprised even her. The structure and purpose of military life gave her a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Her shooting skills, far from being a source of mockery, became a source of respect and recognition from both her fellow recruits and her instructors. During the qualification rounds, Sarah's performance was so exceptional that it caught the attention of special operations recruiters who were always looking for soldiers with unique talents. Her combination of technical skill, emotional stability under pressure, and tactical intelligence made her an ideal candidate for advanced training programs. The opportunity to join special operations came with risks and challenges that would test everything she had learned about herself. But it also represented the culmination of a journey that had begun years earlier on a small-town shooting range, under the patient guidance of a grandfather who had recognized something special in his granddaughter's steady hands and unwavering determination. Sarah accepted the challenge, knowing that she was about to enter a world where the stakes were higher than anything she had ever imagined. She couldn't know that this decision would eventually place her in a position where all the ridicule and doubt she had endured would be transformed into the means of salvation for some of America's most elite warriors. The transformation from small-town outsider to military specialist was just beginning, and the most challenging and important moments of her journey still lay ahead. 3 years after leaving her small Texas hometown, Sergeant Sarah Martinez had transformed from a ridiculed high school student into one of the Army's most skilled marksmen. Her journey through basic training, advanced individual training, and specialized sniper school had been marked by consistent excellence and growing recognition from her superiors. The special operations community was small and tight-knit, where reputation mattered more than background or gender. Sarah had earned her place through demonstrated competence, but she still faced skepticism from some quarters. Old attitudes died hard, even in elite units where performance was supposed to be the only measure that mattered. Her current assignment was with a Joint Special Operations Task Force operating out of a forward base in Afghanistan's volatile eastern provinces. The region was known for its rugged terrain, unpredictable weather, and persistent Taliban activity that made every mission a calculated risk. Sarah served as the designated marksman for a 12-person team that included soldiers from various special operations units. The team's mission was to conduct reconnaissance and surveillance operations in areas where larger conventional forces couldn't operate effectively. Her role was to provide precision fire support and overwatch protection for her teammates during their most vulnerable moments. The team leader was Staff Sergeant David Chun, a veteran Special Forces operator who had initially been skeptical about having a female soldier in his unit. His concerns weren't based on prejudice, but on practical considerations about unit cohesion and the physical demands of their missions. Over time, however, Sarah's professionalism and skill had won him over. "Martinez might be the best shot I've ever worked with," Chen had written in his most recent evaluation. Her ability to remain calm under pressure and deliver accurate fire in challenging conditions is exceptional. She's earned the complete trust and respect of every member of this team. That respect hadn't come easily. Sarah's first few months with the unit had been a careful dance of proving herself while avoiding the appearance of trying too hard. She knew that any mistake would be magnified because of her gender, and any success might be dismissed as luck or the result of special treatment. Her breakthrough moment had come during a mission in the Karingal Valley, where her team had been tasked with observing a suspected weapons cache. The mission had gone sideways when they were ambushed by a larger enemy force, and Sarah's precision shooting had been instrumental in allowing the team to break contact and reach their extraction point safely. During that firefight, Sarah had taken out 3 enemy fighters at distances exceeding 600 meters, shots that required not only technical skill, but also the ability to make split-second calculations while under intense pressure. Her teammates had watched her work with growing amazement, seeing firsthand why Special Operations Command had been so eager to recruit her. Since that mission, Sarah had become an integral part of the team's operational planning. Her input on firing positions, fields of fire, and tactical considerations was actively sought and valued. She had found the acceptance and professional respect that had eluded her throughout her childhood and adolescence. But even in this environment where competence was respected above all else, Sarah occasionally encountered attitudes that reminded her of her high school experience. During briefings with conventional units, she would notice the surprised looks and whispered comments when she was introduced as the team's designated marksman. Some officers seemed unable to reconcile her appearance with her role, asking questions that would never be directed at her male counterparts. "Are you sure you're comfortable with this level of responsibility?" a visiting colonel had asked during a recent mission briefing, his tone suggesting genuine concern rather than malice. The enemy doesn't distinguish between male and female targets, and the physical demands out there can be extreme. Sarah had learned to handle such comments with practiced diplomacy, acknowledging the concerns while firmly establishing her qualifications and experience. Her team members increasingly stepped in to support her during these interactions, making it clear that they had complete confidence in her abilities. The camaraderie she had developed with her teammates was unlike anything she had experienced before. These men had seen her perform under the worst possible conditions and knew exactly what she was capable of. Their acceptance was based on shared hardship and mutual dependence, the strongest foundation for military brotherhood that existed. Corporal Mike Rodriguez, the team's communications specialist, had become particularly protective of Sarah's reputation. Having grown up in a family of strong women, he understood the additional challenges she faced and wasn't hesitant to speak up when he encountered disrespectful attitudes. "I've seen Martinez pull off shots that would make Annie Oakley jealous," he would tell anyone who questioned her presence on the team. "When the shooting starts, I want her watching my back more than any other soldier I've ever served with." The team's medic, Sergeant First Class James Wilson, had initially been one of her harshest critics. His concerns had been practical rather than personal. He worried about the additional complications a female team member might create in terms of logistics, medical care, and prisoner handling procedures. But Sarah's consistent professionalism and tactical contributions had gradually changed his perspective. "I was wrong about her," Wilson had admitted to Chun during a private conversation. "She's not just a good soldier who happens to be female. She's one of the best soldiers I've ever worked with, period. The team is stronger with her in it." These relationships had given Sarah the confidence and support structure she needed to continue developing her skills. She spent her off-duty hours studying enemy tactics, practicing with different weapon systems, and maintaining her equipment to the highest standards. Her dedication was noticed and appreciated by everyone in the unit. The forward operating base where they were stationed was a temporary facility carved out of the harsh Afghan landscape. Living conditions were Spartan, with soldiers sharing small rooms and basic amenities. The isolation and constant threat of attack created an environment where personal differences had to be set aside in favor of unit survival and mission success. Sarah had adapted to this lifestyle better than many of her male counterparts. Her upbringing had taught her to be self-reliant and comfortable in austere conditions. She never complained about the heat, the dust, the limited privacy, or the countless other discomforts that were part of deployed life. Her reputation extended beyond her immediate team to other units operating in the region. Stories of her marksmanship skills had spread through the informal networks that connected special operations personnel, creating a level of recognition that was both gratifying and pressure-inducing. During inter-unit training exercises, soldiers would specifically request to work with Sarah's team, hoping to learn from her techniques and observe her shooting firsthand. These interactions helped establish her credibility throughout the broader special operations community and opened doors for future assignments and opportunities. One such exercise had involved working with a Navy SEAL team that was preparing for a complex direct action mission. The SEALs were known for their elite training and aggressive operational style, and they had initially been skeptical about working with an Army unit, particularly one that included a female soldier. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harrison, the SEAL team leader, had made his feelings clear during the initial planning meeting. "I've got nothing against women in the military," he had said, "but when my boys are going into a hot zone, I need to know that everyone watching our backs is operating at the highest possible level." Sarah had responded by demonstrating her capabilities during a live-fire exercise that pushed every participant to their limits. The SEAL snipers, among the best-trained marksmen in the world, had watched in amazement as she consistently outperformed their best shooters under increasingly difficult conditions. "That little lady can shoot," SEAL Petty Officer First Class Tom Martinez had admitted afterward, using the respectful tone that Sarah had learned to appreciate. "I don't care what anyone says. If she was covering my approach, I'd sleep better at night." The exercise had concluded with the SEAL team requesting that Sarah's unit provide overwatch support for their upcoming mission, a recognition of her abilities that carried significant weight within the special operations community. Such requests were rare and highly valued, representing the kind of professional validation that money couldn't buy. But success brought its own challenges. Sarah found herself under increased scrutiny from higher headquarters, where senior officers were eager to showcase the success of gender integration in special operations. She became a symbol of progressive military policies, a role that made her uncomfortable because it seemed to emphasize her gender over her military skills. "They want to put you on recruiting posters," Chen had warned her after receiving a request from public affairs officers to interview Sarah for a military magazine article. "Be careful about becoming a political symbol instead of just being a soldier." Sarah had declined most media requests, preferring to focus on her mission and her team rather than becoming a spokesperson for broader social issues. She understood the importance of representation, but she also knew that too much publicity could undermine her credibility and effectiveness as an operational soldier. The attention also brought increased pressure to avoid any mistakes or failures that could be used to discredit the broader integration effort. Sarah knew that a single operational failure or personal misstep would be magnified far beyond its actual significance, potentially affecting opportunities for other women seeking to serve in similar roles. This pressure was particularly acute during mission planning sessions, where her input carried extra weight because of her symbolic importance. Sarah had to balance her professional judgment with the knowledge that her recommendations would be scrutinized more carefully than those of her teammates. Despite these challenges, Sarah continued to excel in her role. Her technical skills continued to improve through constant practice and exposure to new situations. She had developed an intuitive understanding of ballistics, weather effects, and target behavior that went beyond what could be taught in any school or manual. Her psychological resilience had also strengthened through exposure to combat stress and the responsibility of protecting her teammates' lives. The weight of that responsibility had initially been overwhelming, but experience had taught her to channel that pressure into enhanced focus and determination. The bond between Sarah and her teammates had evolved from professional respect to genuine friendship and mutual dependence. They had shared dangers and hardships that created connections deeper than family relationships. Each member of the team knew that their survival depended on the competence and dedication of every other member. As they prepared for what would become their most challenging mission yet, none of them could anticipate that Sarah's journey from small-town outcast to elite warrior was about to reach its most crucial test. The ridicule and doubt she had faced throughout her life had forged her into exactly the kind of soldier who could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The upcoming operation would test not only her marksmanship skills, but also her ability to make life and death decisions under extreme pressure. Everything she had learned about herself and her capabilities would be put to the ultimate test in a situation where failure was not an option and success would require her to exceed even her own high standards. The transformation from ridiculed teenager to respected warrior was nearly complete, but the most important chapter of her story was still to be written. The mission briefing took place in a secure tent on the forward operating base, where maps and satellite imagery covered every available surface. The target was a high-value Taliban commander known as the Ghost, who had been responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the eastern provinces. Intelligence reports indicated that the Ghost was planning to attend a secret meeting in a remote mountain village, providing coalition forces with their first real opportunity to capture or eliminate him. The mission would require a joint operation between Sarah's Special Operations Team and a Navy SEAL unit that specialized in direct action raids. Lieutenant Commander Harrison stood before the assembled operators, pointing to aerial photographs that showed the target village nestled in a valley surrounded by steep mountain ridges. The terrain was challenging, with limited approach routes and multiple escape paths that would make the operation extremely complex. The Ghost has survived this long by being careful and paranoid, Harrison explained, his voice carrying the weight of experience. He never stays in one place long, and he always has multiple escape routes planned. This might be our only chance to get him. The plan called for the SEAL team to conduct a direct assault on the compound where the meeting would take place, while Sarah's unit would provide overwatch and sniper support from elevated positions around the valley. The mission timing was critical, as intelligence suggested the meeting would last only a few hours. Sarah studied the topographical maps with intense concentration, identifying potential firing positions and calculating ranges to various points within the target area. Her role would be to provide precision fire support for the assault team, while also watching for enemy reinforcements or escape attempts. The primary sniper position is here, Chen said, pointing to a ridge approximately 800 meters from the target compound. Martinez will establish overwatch from that location, while the rest of us set up blocking positions along the likely escape routes. The distance was challenging but well within Sarah's capabilities. She had successfully engaged targets at similar ranges during training and operational missions, but never in such a high-stakes situation with so many variables in play. The SEAL team members studied their own assault plans, reviewing room-clearing procedures and contingency measures for various scenarios. Their confidence was evident, but Sarah could see the underlying tension that always preceded dangerous operations. These were experienced warriors who understood the risks they would be facing. "What's our backup plan if the sniper position gets compromised?" asked Petty Officer Martinez, the SEAL team's designated marksman. His question reflected the practical concerns that every operator considered before a mission. "The terrain provides several alternative positions," Sarah replied, tracing potential routes on the map. "If I have to relocate, I can maintain overwatch from any of these 3 locations, though the ranges will be different." Her calm professionalism during the briefing helped establish confidence among the SEAL team members, who were still adjusting to the idea of working with a female sniper. They had heard about her reputation, but this would be their first opportunity to see her skills in action during a real-world operation. The mission launch was scheduled for the following evening, giving the teams 24 hours to finalize their preparations and conduct rehearsals. Sarah spent the time checking and rechecking her equipment, studying weather forecasts, and visualizing the various scenarios they might encounter. Her rifle was a customized M24 sniper weapon system that she had personally modified and zeroed for maximum accuracy. Every component had been carefully selected and tested, from the match-grade ammunition to the precision scope that would allow her to engage targets at extreme range. The psychological preparation was just as important as the technical aspects. Sarah had learned to use meditation and visualization techniques to maintain focus and control her stress levels during high-pressure situations. She spent hours mentally rehearsing the mission, imagining different scenarios and her responses to each one. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, the Joint Task Force began their movement toward the target area. The helicopter flight took them over terrain that seemed almost alien in its harsh beauty, with jagged peaks and deep valleys that had remained unchanged for thousands of years. Sarah felt the familiar combination of nervousness and anticipation that always preceded dangerous missions. Her training had taught her to embrace these feelings rather than fight them, using the heightened awareness they provided to sharpen her performance when it mattered most. The insertion went smoothly, with both teams landing at their designated locations without enemy contact. The march to their positions took several hours over difficult terrain, requiring careful navigation and noise discipline to avoid detection by enemy sentries. Sarah's climb to the overwatch position was particularly challenging, requiring her to ascend nearly 1,000 feet of steep rocky slopes while carrying her full equipment load. The physical demands were intense, but her conditioning and determination carried her through the difficult approach. By dawn, she was in position on the ridge overlooking the target valley. The view was spectacular and tactically perfect, providing clear lines of sight to the target compound and all likely escape routes. She established her hide site carefully, camouflaging her position to avoid detection from ground observers or aerial surveillance. The waiting began, the most psychologically challenging part of any sniper mission. Hours of absolute stillness and constant vigilance, watching for any sign of movement or activity that might indicate the target's arrival. Sarah had learned to embrace this period of enforced patience, using it to study the terrain and refine her understanding of the tactical situation. Through her scope, she could see the SEAL assault team moving into their positions around the target compound. Their movement was smooth and professional, each man taking advantage of available cover and concealment as they closed in on their objective. The first sign that something was wrong came when Sarah noticed movement on the ridgelines surrounding the valley. Through her scope, she could see armed figures taking positions that would allow them to observe or engage the assault team. The intelligence had been incomplete. This wasn't just a meeting, it was an ambush. She immediately transmitted a warning to both teams, but it was too late to abort the mission. The SEAL team was already committed to their assault, and the enemy fighters were in position to cut off their escape routes. The carefully planned operation was about to become a desperate fight for survival. The compound erupted in gunfire as the SEALs breached the main building, only to discover that their target had never been there. The intelligence had been deliberately leaked to draw coalition forces into a trap, and now both teams found themselves fighting for their lives against a larger and better-positioned enemy force. From her elevated position, Sarah could see the full scope of the ambush unfolding below her. Enemy fighters were emerging from concealed positions throughout the valley, surrounding the SEAL team and cutting off their planned escape routes. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Her radio crackled with urgent communications as the teams tried to coordinate their response to the unexpected threat. The SEAL team leader was calling for immediate extraction, but the landing zones were now under enemy fire and unusable for helicopter operations. Sarah began engaging enemy positions with methodical precision, prioritizing targets that posed the greatest immediate threat to the assault team. Each shot had to count, as she had limited ammunition and the distances involved required perfect accuracy to be effective. Her first target was an enemy machine gunner who had set up on a ridge opposite her position. The range was nearly 1,000 meters, requiring her to compensate for wind drift and the steep downward angle of the shot. The bullet found its mark, eliminating a threat that could have devastated the trapped SEAL team. The engagement continued for hours as Sarah systematically eliminated enemy fighters who tried to close in on the assault team. Her position gave her a commanding view of the battlefield, allowing her to identify threats that the ground teams couldn't see from their limited perspective. But the enemy had identified her location and was beginning to direct fire toward her position. Bullets struck the rocks around her hide site, forcing her to shift positions repeatedly to avoid being pinned down or eliminated by counter-sniper fire. The situation reached a critical point when the SEAL team reported that they were running low on ammunition and had several wounded members who needed immediate medical attention. The original extraction plan was no longer viable, and new options had to be developed under extreme pressure. Sarah realized that the key to the team's survival lay in her ability to suppress the enemy positions that were preventing helicopter extraction. The landing zone had to be cleared of threats before any rescue attempt could be made, and she was the only one in position to accomplish that mission. The challenge was enormous. She would have to engage multiple enemy positions at extreme range while under fire herself, requiring a level of precision and speed that pushed the boundaries of human capability. Everything she had learned throughout her life had led to this moment. As she prepared for what would be the most important shooting of her career, Sarah thought briefly about the journey that had brought her to this mountain ridge in Afghanistan. All the ridicule, all the doubt, all the challenges she had faced had forged her into exactly the kind of warrior who could make the difference in this desperate situation. The lives of some of America's most elite fighters now depended on the shooting skills that had once made her a social outcast in a small Texas town. The transformation from ridiculed teenager to combat veteran was about to reach its ultimate test. The radio chatter became increasingly desperate as the SEAL team's situation deteriorated. Sarah could hear the strain in Lieutenant Commander Harrison's voice as he coordinated his team's defense while trying to treat wounded teammates under intense enemy fire. Overwatch, this is Neptune 6, Harrison transmitted, using the mission call signs. We've got 3 wounded and are down to our last magazines. We need immediate suppression of the Northern Ridge positions or we're not getting out of here. Sarah studied the Northern Ridge through her scope, identifying at least 6 enemy fighting positions that had the SEAL team pinned down in the compound courtyard. The ranges varied from 700 to over 1,000 meters, and several of the positions were partially concealed behind rocks and vegetation. The mathematical calculations ran through her mind automatically, factoring in wind speed and direction, temperature, humidity, and the ballistic characteristics of her ammunition. Each shot would require split-second adjustments based on the constantly changing tactical situation. Neptune 6, this is Overwatch, Sarah responded, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. I have eyes on 6 positions along the Northern Ridge. Beginning engagement now. Her first target was the closest and most threatening position, where an enemy fighter with an RPG was preparing to engage the compound. The rocket-propelled grenade could kill or wound multiple SEALs with a single shot, making its elimination the highest priority. Sarah controlled her breathing, timing her shot for the natural pause between heartbeats. The rifle's recoil was familiar and comforting, and through her scope she saw the enemy fighter collapse as the bullet found its target. The RPG threat was neutralized, but her shot had revealed her position to the enemy, and within seconds bullets began impacting around her hide site. She had to move immediately or risk being pinned down or eliminated by return fire. Rolling quickly to her left, Sarah found a new firing position among the rocks that offered both concealment and a different angle on the enemy positions. The movement saved her life as a burst of automatic fire chewed up the ground where she had been lying just moments before. From her new position, she engaged the second target, an enemy machine gunner who was raking the compound courtyard with devastating fire. The range was nearly 800 meters, and the target was partially concealed behind a rock outcropping that limited her available target area. Sarah waited patiently for the gunner to expose himself enough for a clean shot. When he shifted position to get a better angle on the SEALs, she was ready. The 7.62 millimeters bullet struck him center mass, and the machine gun fell silent. The enemy began to react to the threat Sarah posed, with several fighters attempting to maneuver toward her position while others concentrated fire on her general location. She could hear bullets striking rocks nearby and whining overhead as she sought new cover. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. When the shooting starts, stay calm and trust your training. Panic kills more soldiers than enemy bullets. The advice had never been more relevant than in this moment of extreme pressure and danger. Sarah's third shot eliminated a sniper who had been engaging the SEALs from a well-concealed position nearly 1,000 meters away. The extreme range required her to use all of her technical knowledge and experience to compensate for the bullet's trajectory and the environmental factors affecting its flight. The enemy's tactical situation was beginning to change as Sarah systematically eliminated their most effective fighters. The remaining enemy positions were still dangerous, but they were becoming increasingly cautious about exposing themselves to her accurate fire. Overwatch, Neptune 6, Harrison's voice came over the radio again. Outstanding shooting. We can see the Northern Ridge positions backing down. Can you engage the eastern positions that have us pinned from that direction? Sarah shifted her attention to the eastern ridge, where 3 more enemy positions were preventing the SEALs from moving to a more defensible location within the compound. These positions were at different ranges and angles, requiring her to recalculate her firing solutions for each target. The fourth engagement was complicated by the target's use of effective cover and concealment. The enemy fighter was firing from behind a large boulder that protected most of his body, exposing only small portions of himself for brief periods. Sarah had to wait for the perfect moment when enough of the target was visible for a lethal shot. When the opportunity came, she took it without hesitation. The bullet found its mark despite the challenging shot angle and limited target area. Another threat to the SEAL team was eliminated. But the engagement had taken time, and Sarah could see enemy reinforcements moving through the valley below. The tactical situation was about to become even more desperate as fresh enemy fighters arrived to support the ambush. All stations, this is Neptune 6, Harrison transmitted. We've got reinforcements moving in from the south. Estimate 20 to 30 additional fighters. We need extraction now, or this is going to get a lot worse. Sarah could see the reinforcements through her scope, a column of armed men moving quickly through the valley toward the compound. They were well-equipped and moved with the discipline of experienced fighters, not the untrained militia the teams had expected to face. The arrival of reinforcements meant that the window for successful extraction was closing rapidly. Sarah had to eliminate the remaining threats on the ridges quickly so that helicopters could safely approach the landing zone. Her fifth shot targeted the leader of the eastern ridge positions, a fighter who had been effectively coordinating the enemy's defensive fire. Eliminating him would disrupt their coordination and potentially cause the remaining fighters to withdraw or become less effective. The shot required her to engage a partially concealed target at maximum effective range while under fire from multiple positions. Sarah had to expose herself to get the shot angle she needed, knowing that the enemy was actively trying to locate and eliminate her. The bullet struck home, and Sarah immediately saw the effect on the enemy positions. Without their leader's coordination, the remaining fighters became less aggressive and more focused on their own survival than on preventing the SEAL's escape. Overwatch, Neptune 6. That was beautiful shooting, Harrison transmitted. The eastern positions are pulling back. Can you engage the southern approaches to slow down those reinforcements? Sarah turned her attention to the approaching reinforcements, knowing that each enemy fighter she could eliminate or force into cover would improve the SEAL's chances of successful extraction. The ranges were extreme, pushing the limits of her rifle's effective capabilities. Her sixth shot struck the lead vehicle in the reinforcement column, causing it to crash and blocking the narrow mountain road. The accident created chaos among the following vehicles and forced the enemy fighters to dismount and proceed on foot, significantly slowing their advance. The psychological effect of Sarah's long-range precision fire was becoming evident among the enemy forces. They had not expected to face such accurate shooting from such extreme distances, and many of them were becoming reluctant to expose themselves to her fire. All stations, Neptune 6, Harrison announced over the radio. Extraction birds are inbound. Overwatch has cleared enough of the threat to allow approach to the alternate LZ. Prepare for immediate extraction. Sarah could hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors approaching through the mountains. The extraction was going to be challenging under the best circumstances, and the presence of enemy forces in the area made it even more dangerous. Her mission now shifted to providing protective fire during the most vulnerable phase of the operation, the actual extraction process when the helicopters would be exposed to ground fire while landing and taking off. As the first helicopter approached the landing zone, Sarah identified several enemy positions that could engage the aircraft during its approach. The helicopter was a large, slow-moving target that would be extremely vulnerable to ground fire, making the suppression of these threats critical to mission success. Her seventh shot eliminated an enemy fighter who had positioned himself with a clear shot at the helicopter's landing approach. The range was challenging, but the importance of protecting the extraction aircraft made accuracy even more critical than usual. The helicopter touched down in the landing zone as SEAL team members sprinted from the compound carrying their wounded teammates. The aircraft was vulnerable during the loading process, requiring Sarah to maintain constant vigilance against enemy threats. Her eighth shot struck an enemy fighter who had emerged from cover to engage the grounded helicopter with an automatic weapon. The bullet found its mark just as the enemy fighter was taking aim, preventing what could have been a devastating attack on the aircraft. As the first helicopter lifted off with half the SEAL team aboard, Sarah prepared to cover the approach of the second aircraft that would extract the remaining personnel. The enemy was becoming increasingly aggressive as they realized their opportunity to inflict casualties was slipping away. Her ninth shot eliminated a threat to the second helicopter's approach, maintaining the protective umbrella that allowed the extraction to proceed safely. Each successful engagement brought the mission closer to a successful conclusion. The second helicopter landed and began loading the remaining SEAL team members as Sarah continued to scan for threats through her scope. The enemy had begun a desperate rush toward the landing zone, trying to reach it before the extraction could be completed. Her 10th shot stopped the lead element of this final enemy assault, causing the attackers to seek cover and allowing the extraction to proceed without interference. The helicopter lifted off with the remaining SEALs aboard, leaving only Sarah's team on the ground. Now it was time for her own extraction, but first she had to safely egress from her position and reach the alternate pickup point where her team was waiting. The enemy knew her general location and would be actively hunting for her as she moved through the mountains. The journey from her sniper position to the extraction point would be the most dangerous part of her entire mission, requiring her to evade enemy searchers while carrying her full equipment load across difficult terrain. Sarah began her movement from the sniper position with extreme caution, knowing that enemy fighters were actively searching for her location. The 10 precision shots she had fired had saved the SEAL team, but they had also revealed her general position to an enemy that was now focused on hunting her down. She moved through the rocky terrain, using every technique her training had taught her about tactical movement and camouflage. Each step had to be carefully planned to avoid creating noise or movement that could be detected by enemy observers who were undoubtedly watching the ridgeline where she had been operating. The weight of her equipment made the movement even more challenging. In addition to her rifle and ammunition, she carried communication gear, survival equipment, and medical supplies that could mean the difference between life and death if she became separated from her team during the extraction. As she picked her way down the mountainside, Sarah could hear enemy voices calling to each other as they coordinated their search efforts. They knew she was somewhere in the area, and they were systematically checking every possible hiding place and escape route. Her radio crackled softly with a transmission from Staff Sergeant Chun, who was coordinating the extraction of her team from their blocking positions around the valley. Overwatch, this is Alpha 6. What's your status? We need to move to the pickup point in 15 minutes. Alpha 6, Overwatch, Sarah whispered into her radio microphone. I'm moving through the rocks about 500 meters below my last position. I can hear enemy searchers nearby, but haven't been spotted yet. The extraction point was nearly 2 kilometers away through terrain that offered limited concealment and multiple opportunities for enemy ambush. Sarah would have to cross several open areas where she would be vulnerable to observation and engagement from multiple directions. As she moved through a particularly exposed section of mountainside, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of voices getting closer. She immediately froze behind a large boulder, controlling her breathing and listening carefully to determine how many enemy fighters were nearby and which direction they were moving. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see 2 armed men working their way methodically through the area where she had been shooting from earlier. They were experienced trackers who understood how to read the terrain and identify the subtle signs left by someone moving through the mountains. Sarah remained motionless for nearly 10 minutes as the searchers passed within 50 meters of her position. Her camouflage and fieldcraft training proved its worth as the enemy fighters moved past without detecting her presence despite their careful search methods. Once they had moved far enough away, Sarah continued her movement toward the extraction point. But now she knew that the enemy was conducting an organized search with multiple teams, making her journey significantly more dangerous than originally anticipated. Her radio received another transmission from Chun, this time with more urgency in his voice. Overwatch, Alpha 6. We've got enemy movement near the extraction point. The pickup is going to be hot. Can you provide Overwatch support when you arrive? Sarah acknowledged the transmission while calculating the implications of what Chun had reported. If enemy forces had reached the extraction point ahead of her, the situation was becoming critical for everyone involved. Her team might need her shooting skills one more time. She increased her pace despite the added risk, knowing that her teammates might be under attack and unable to reach safety without her support. The bonds forged through shared danger and mutual dependence drove her to take risks she might not have accepted for her own survival alone. The sound of gunfire in the distance confirmed that her team had made contact with enemy forces near the extraction point. Sarah could hear the distinctive sounds of different weapons systems as both sides engaged each other across the rocky terrain. As she crested a ridge that overlooked the extraction point, Sarah could see the tactical situation developing below her. Her team was positioned in a defensive perimeter around the designated landing zone, but enemy forces were approaching from multiple directions in an attempt to overrun the position before the extraction helicopter could arrive. Sarah quickly established a firing position among the rocks and began engaging the enemy forces that posed the greatest threat to her team's defensive positions. The ranges were shorter than her previous engagements, but the targets were moving rapidly and using available cover effectively. Her first shot eliminated an enemy fighter who was flanking her team's position with what appeared to be an explosive device. The threat of a suicide attack or improvised explosive device made this target the highest priority, and Sarah's bullet stopped the attack before it could be executed. The sound of her rifle attracted immediate attention from the enemy forces, who began directing fire toward her new position. But Sarah had learned valuable lessons during her previous engagements and was ready to move quickly when her location became compromised. Her second shot struck another enemy fighter who had achieved a position that threatened multiple members of her team. The precision of her shooting continued to disrupt enemy tactical plans and forced them to take cover rather than pressing their attacks aggressively. Overwatch Alpha 6. Chen transmitted between bursts of automatic weapons fire. Outstanding support. The enemy is backing off from the northern approach. Extraction bird is inbound, 5 minutes out. Sarah could see the enemy forces beginning to withdraw as the approaching helicopter became audible in the distance. Her accurate fire had once again proven decisive in preventing enemy forces from achieving their tactical objectives. But the mission wasn't complete until everyone was safely aboard the extraction aircraft and clear of the area. Sarah maintained her Overwatch position, scanning for threats that might emerge during the vulnerable loading and takeoff phase of the extraction. The helicopter appeared over the ridgeline and began its approach to the landing zone, its rotor wash creating clouds of dust and debris that reduced visibility for everyone on the ground. Sarah shifted her focus to the areas beyond the immediate landing zone, watching for enemy forces that might try to engage the aircraft during its approach. Her team members began moving toward the landing zone in coordinated bounds, with some providing cover while others moved to the aircraft. The tactical movement was smooth and professional despite the stress and fatigue of the prolonged engagement. Sarah's final shots of the mission eliminated 2 enemy fighters who emerged from concealment to engage the helicopter during its landing approach. The precision and speed of her shooting prevented what could have been a successful attack on the extraction aircraft. As her teammates loaded aboard the helicopter, Sarah began her own movement toward the aircraft while maintaining observation for additional threats. The enemy had been beaten back, but determined fighters might still attempt a last-minute attack on the departing aircraft. She reached the helicopter and climbed aboard as the pilot prepared for immediate takeoff. Through the aircraft's windows, Sarah could see enemy fighters emerging from cover to engage the departing helicopter, but they were too late and too far away to pose an effective threat. The helicopter lifted off and began its flight back toward the forward operating base, carrying a team that had accomplished an impossible mission through superior tactics, training, and individual heroism. Sarah looked down at the valley below, knowing that her shooting had been the decisive factor in their survival. Lieutenant Commander Harrison's voice came over the aircraft's communication system as he contacted his superiors to report the mission's outcome. Neptune Base, Neptune 6. Mission complete. Target was not at the location, but we've disrupted a major enemy operation and extracted all personnel safely. He paused for a moment before adding, recommend immediate recognition for the Army sniper who provided Overwatch. Without her support, we would have lost the entire team. Her shooting was the most impressive display of marksmanship I've witnessed in 15 years of special operations. The helicopter flight back to base gave Sarah time to reflect on the mission and its significance. She had fired a total of 23 shots during the engagement, with each shot either eliminating an enemy threat or disrupting enemy tactical plans at critical moments. But, more importantly, she had proven herself under the most demanding circumstances possible. Every doubt, every criticism, every moment of ridicule she had endured throughout her life had been answered by her performance during this single mission. The same skills that had made her an outcast in high school had saved the lives of some of America's most elite warriors. The journey from small-town shooting range to Afghan mountainside had validated everything her grandfather had taught her about the importance of precision, patience, and commitment to excellence. As the forward operating base came into view, Sarah knew that her life would never be the same. The respect she had earned from the SEAL team would spread throughout the special operations community, opening doors and opportunities that had never existed before. But, perhaps more importantly, she had finally found complete peace with who she was and what she was capable of achieving. The ridicule and doubt were behind her, replaced by the quiet confidence that comes from proving yourself when it matters most. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad, and Sarah stepped back onto solid ground knowing that she had completed the transformation from ridiculed teenager to respected warrior. The laughs that had once hurt her had been silenced forever by the precision of her rifle and the strength of her character. In the debriefing sessions that followed, the SEAL team members would tell and retell the story of the Army sniper who had saved their lives with impossible shots under extreme pressure. The story would become legend within the special operations community, inspiring other women to pursue similar paths and proving that excellence recognizes no boundaries. Sarah Martinez had found her place in the world, and that place was exactly where she had always known it should be, behind a rifle, protecting those who needed her skills the most. The journey from outcast to hero was complete, but her service to her country and her teammates was just beginning.